Your Honor, she can't even hear our daughter cry. The words left my ex-husband's mouth with practiced sincerity, his hand placed over his heart like he was reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Behind him, his mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. His new girlfriend, the one he'd been sleeping with for the last 8 months of our marriage, nodded solemnly from the gallery. And the judge, a 63-year-old man named Harold Patterson, looked at me with something I'd seen my entire life, pity disguised as concern. But here's what none of them knew: I'd been recording everything for 6 months. And the truth was about to detonate like a bomb in this courtroom. My name is Marisol Vega. I'm 34 years old. I've been deaf since birth. And in approximately 4 minutes, I was going to watch my ex-husband's entire case collapse, along with his lawyer's career, his mother's smug satisfaction, and every lie he'd told to try to take my daughter away from me. Let me start from the beginning. I met Brandon Hollister during my second year of law school at Georgetown. Yes, law school. I graduated third in my class, passed the bar on my first attempt, and spent 7 years as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office before transitioning to disability rights advocacy. I mention this because Brandon's entire case rested on the assumption that a deaf woman couldn't possibly be competent enough to raise a child. He'd been charming back then. Learned basic ASL to communicate with me. Told me my deafness was beautiful and unique. His family had been less enthusiastic. His mother, Patricia, had pulled him aside at our engagement party and asked if he was sure about this, but Brandon had defended me. Or so I thought. We got married in 2018. Our daughter, Isabella, was born in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. She came out perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and hearing as sharp as a bat. I remember the audiologist confirming it, and Brandon squeezing my hand with what I interpreted as relief. I should have recognized it for what it was, the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 years, Brandon changed. He stopped signing at home. Started speaking to Isabella in ways I couldn't follow, turning away so I couldn't read his lips. When I asked him to include me, he'd roll his eyes. It's exhausting, he said once. Having to perform for you all the time. Perform? Like communicating with your wife was a theatrical burden. I found out about the affair in March of last year. Her name was Kendra, 26 years old, hearing, a paralegal at the firm where Brandon worked as a financial advisor. I discovered the texts on his iPad when Isabella was playing a game and accidentally swiped to his messages. The things he'd written about me, about my disability, about how trapped he felt, about how Kendra understood him in ways I never could, made me physically sick. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I did what any good lawyer would do: I gathered evidence. I installed recording software on the home devices, legal in Virginia as long as one party consents, and I consented. I documented every conversation I could capture through the smart speakers, the video doorbell, the baby monitor in Isabella's room. I saved every text, every email, every voicemail he left thinking I couldn't hear them. He'd forgotten something crucial about me: I might not be able to hear, but I could read. And technology had given me ears everywhere. When I filed for divorce in September, Brandon didn't just want out of the marriage. He wanted Isabella. Full custody. And his argument? That a deaf mother was inherently unfit to raise a hearing child. His lawyer, a slick man named Gerald Thornton who specialized in high-conflict custody disputes, had built an entire case around my disability. They'd hired an expert witness, a psychologist named Dr. Bernard Kemp, who'd written papers arguing that deaf parents created communication barriers that could damage a child's linguistic development. They gathered statements from Brandon's family about how concerned they were for Isabella's safety. They'd even gotten Kendra to submit an affidavit about how Isabella had seemed confused during the few times she'd been around her, as if a 4-year-old adjusting to her father's affair was evidence of my parental failure. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in January. Cold, gray, the kind of day that makes everything feel hopeless. I sat at the respondents' table with my lawyer, Diana Okafor, a brilliant woman who handled disability discrimination cases for 20 years, and my ASL interpreter, Marcus, who would translate everything for me in real time. Brandon's side went first. For 2 hours, I watched him paint a picture of a helpless, incompetent mother who couldn't keep her child safe. He described fictional scenarios where Isabella had cried for help and I hadn't responded. He talked about how Kendra, his girlfriend, the woman he cheated with, would be a better maternal figure because she could actually communicate with Isabella. He even cried on the stand, wiping his eyes as he described his fear for his daughter's well-being. Patricia Hollister testified next. She described me as sweet but limited. She expressed grave concerns about Isabella's future. She mentioned, 3 separate times, that she offered to help by taking Isabella on weekends so I could rest. The implication was clear: I was too broken to handle full-time motherhood. Dr. Kemp delivered his expert opinion with academic authority. He cited studies, outdated ones from the 1980s, suggesting that children of deaf parents face developmental challenges. He recommended that Isabella be placed primarily with her father to ensure optimal linguistic exposure. Through it all, Judge Patterson listened attentively. He nodded at the right moments. He asked concerned questions. And every time he looked at me, I saw it, that assumption, buried deep, that maybe they were right. Maybe a deaf woman really couldn't raise a hearing child as well as a hearing parent could. By the time they finished, Brandon's side was practically celebrating. Gerald Thornton had a satisfied smirk. Patricia was already discussing weekend schedules with Kendra. Brandon looked at me with something approaching triumph. Then it was our turn. Diana stood slowly. She was calm, the kind of calm that comes from knowing you have a winning hand. Your Honor, she began, before I call my client to testify, I'd like to submit some additional evidence. Audio recordings made in the Hollister Vega household over the past 6 months. Gerald Thornton shot to his feet. Objection. We were not provided with these recordings in discovery. They were provided 3 weeks ago, Diana said smoothly. I have the delivery confirmation. Perhaps Mr. Thornton's office misplaced them. She turned to the judge. Virginia is a one-party consent state. My client legally recorded these conversations. They are admissible. Judge Patterson considered for a moment, then nodded. I'll allow it. Proceed. Diana pressed play on the courtroom's audio system. Brandon's voice filled the room, crystal clear. Make sure the judge believes it. My new girlfriend's lawyer wrote the script. We just have to make Marisol look incompetent enough, and Patterson will give me full custody. He's old school, he'll buy the deaf mother angle. Then another voice, Gerald Thornton's, the expert witness is confirmed. Kemp owes me a favor. He'll say whatever we need about developmental concerns. Just keep your story straight and look sympathetic. The courtroom went silent. Brandon's face drained of color. Gerald Thornton's briefcase slipped from his hands, papers scattering across the floor. Patricia's handkerchief froze halfway to her face. And Judge Patterson, the old-school judge they'd been counting on to be biased, turned slowly to look at the petitioner's table with an expression that could freeze lava. There's more, Your Honor, Diana said. She played the next recording. Brandon and Kendra, discussing how to coach Isabella to say negative things about me. Just ask her leading questions, Kendra suggested. Kids repeat whatever adults tell them. Then another. Brandon on the phone with his mother, Marisol's a great mom, honestly. Isabella adores her. But I can't let Kendra think I'm stuck with a deaf wife. This custody thing is just to get Marisol to agree to supervised visitation so Kendra feels like she's one and another. Dr. Kemp and Gerald Thornton discussing payment for his testimony, the usual rate for custody cases. Just make it sound academic. Nobody questions a PhD. By the time Diana finished, Brandon was visibly shaking. Gerald Thornton had his head in his hands. Patricia had stopped dabbing her eyes and was staring at her son like she'd never seen him before. Your Honor, Diana continued, I'd also like to submit into evidence my client's credentials. Marisol Vega graduated 3rd in her class from Georgetown Law. She served as a prosecutor for 7 years before becoming one of the leading disability rights advocates in Virginia. She has published 12 papers on ADA compliance, testified before Congress twice, and currently serves on the Governor's Council for Disability Services. She placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. Additionally, I have statements from Isabella's pediatrician, her preschool teachers, and her speech therapist, all confirming that Isabella's linguistic development is not just normal, but advanced. She's in the 95th percentile for vocabulary. She's also learning ASL, which research shows enhances cognitive development in young children. Diana smiled slightly. Apparently, having a deaf mother has been quite beneficial. Judge Patterson held up his hand. I've heard enough. He turned to Brandon's table. Mr. Hollister. Mr. Thornton. What I've just heard constitutes fraud upon this court. Witness tampering. Conspiracy to commit perjury. And what appears to be a coordinated effort to discriminate against a parent based on disability, which, I shouldn't have to remind anyone, is a federal civil rights violation. Gerald Thornton tried to speak. Your Honor, I can explain. You can explain to the state bar when they review your license. Judge Patterson's voice was ice. And to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which I'll be referring this case to for potential criminal charges. He turned to Brandon. As for custody, Mr. Hollister, you've demonstrated through your own recorded words that your motivation isn't your daughter's well-being. It's manipulation, ego, and accommodation of your extramarital relationship. Your Honor, please, Brandon started. I'm not finished. The judge's gavel came down hard. I'm awarding full physical and legal custody to Ms. Vega. Mr. Hollister will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending a psychological evaluation. If he completes a parenting course and demonstrates genuine behavioral change over the next 12 months, we can revisit the arrangement. He paused. And Mr. Hollister? If I ever see you in my courtroom again trying to weaponize a disability against a parent, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never see unsupervised time with any child again. Am I clear? Brandon nodded, unable to speak. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. And just like that, it was over. I sat very still for a moment, watching through Marcus's interpretation as the courtroom erupted into chaos. Gerald Thornton was arguing with a court officer. Patricia was crying, real tears this time. Kendra had already slipped out the back door, probably realizing her role in this disaster was about to become very public. Brandon stood frozen at his table, staring at me. I met his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at me with what I thought was love, the same eyes that had watched me walk down the aisle, that had cried when Isabella was born. I signed 2 words to him, slowly and clearly so he'd understand even though he'd stopped practicing years ago. I heard everything. Then I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Diana caught up with me in the hallway. That was one of the most satisfying moments of my career, she said, signing as she spoke. You should have seen Patterson's face when the recording started. I thought he was going to leap over the bench. I smiled. Thank you. For believing me. For not assuming that you were anything less than brilliant? Diana shook her head. Marisol, I've known you for 10 years. Anyone who underestimates you is a fool. Brandon Hollister is just the latest in a long line. My mother was waiting outside the courthouse with Isabella. The moment my daughter saw me, she broke free and ran, her little legs pumping as fast as they could go. I knelt down just in time to catch her, pulling her into my arms so tight I could feel her heart beating against mine. Mommy, she said, and then signed it too, the way she always did, because my daughter had grown up understanding that communication isn't about sound. It's about connection. Hi, baby, I signed back. Ready to go home? She nodded eagerly. Can we get ice cream? We can get whatever you want. My mother, who had learned ASL the week after I was born and had never stopped advocating for me, wrapped her arms around both of us. I'm so proud of you, she signed. Your father would be too. I blinked back tears. My father had died when I was 19, a car accident that had taken him before I finished college. But he'd been the one who taught me that being deaf wasn't a limitation. It was just a different way of experiencing the world. I know, I signed back. I know. The aftermath was swift and brutal, for Brandon's side. Gerald Thornton was disbarred within 6 months. The state bar found evidence of similar tactics in 3 other custody cases, all involving parents with disabilities. He faced criminal charges and eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, receiving 18 months of probation and permanent loss of his license. Dr. Bernard Kemp's expert testimony was investigated by his professional board. His outdated research was formally discredited, and he was stripped of his credentials. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Delaware. Kendra left Brandon within a month of the hearing. Apparently, she hadn't signed up to be associated with a man facing potential criminal charges and public humiliation. She moved to Florida and blocked him on everything. Patricia Hollister sent me a letter. A real, handwritten letter, delivered to my door. In it, she apologized, not just for the trial, but for years of subtle dismissals and backhanded comments. She admitted she'd been prejudiced against me from the start, and she was ashamed. She asked if, someday, she might be allowed to be part of Isabella's life in a healthy way. I haven't responded yet. I'm still thinking about it. As for Brandon, he completed his parenting course. He started learning ASL again, for real this time. He shows up for his supervised visits, and he's trying. Whether it's genuine growth or just self-preservation, I can't say yet. But Isabella deserves a father who's at least making an effort, so I'm cautiously open to seeing where it goes. The case made national news. Deaf mother exposes conspiracy to strip custody was the headline that went viral. I was interviewed by 3 major networks, all of whom asked the same question: how did you stay so calm when they were saying those things about you? My answer was always the same: I've been underestimated my entire life. People assume that because I can't hear, I can't understand, can't succeed, can't parent. But the thing about being constantly underestimated is that you learn to prepare. You learn to document. You learn to wait for the right moment. And you learn that the truth, when it finally comes out, speaks louder than any voice ever could. I used the publicity to launch a nonprofit, the Vega Foundation for Disabled Parents. We provide legal resources, advocacy training, and support for parents facing discrimination in custody proceedings. In our first year, we helped 47 families. In our second year, we helped over 200. Last month, I testified before Congress again, this time about custody discrimination against disabled parents. 3 senators have signed on to sponsor legislation that would require additional scrutiny in cases where disability is cited as a factor in custody decisions. Isabella sat in the gallery, watching her mother address the United States Senate. She's 6 now, still hearing, still learning ASL, still in the 95th percentile for vocabulary. When I finished my testimony, she stood up and signed, "I love you, Mommy," so enthusiastically that several senators smiled. One of them, a woman from Virginia who has a deaf brother, signed back, "You have an amazing mother." Isabella grinned and signed, "I know." That night, after we got home and I'd tucked Isabella into bed, I stood by her window for a long time. The world outside was quiet, or at least, I assume it was. I've never known what quiet sounds like. But I've learned that silence isn't emptiness. It's just a different kind of space. A space where I built a career. A space where I raised a daughter. A space where I fought back against everyone who assumed my deafness made me less than. Brandon had told the judge I couldn't hear my daughter cry. He was right. I can't hear her cry. But I can feel her climb into my bed during thunderstorms. I can see her face light up when I pick her up from school. I can read her lips when she tells me about her day, and I can feel her arms around my neck when she hugs me goodnight. I can't hear her say, "I love you." But I can see it in her hands every single day, signed with the kind of fluency that only comes from a child who was raised to believe that communication isn't about sound. It's about love. And love, I've learned, doesn't need ears to be heard. It just needs someone willing to listen in whatever language matters most.